Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. When speaking in terms of race and ethnicity, sometimes we tend to classify ourselves and others in terms of basic outward appearances. But what does it mean to be biracial in America? What does it mean to not be subject to the normal classifications of race? Well, today on Campus Living, we're going to talk to Dr. Laverne Gyant, Joshua Johnson, Mitchell Gaddis, and Courtney Borges about what it means to be biracial in America. Thanks for joining us for today's edition of Campus Living. I'm your host, Ileia Luke, and today we're talking about being biracial in America. When checking NIU's webpage for institutional research, you may find that there is very little information about the biracial student population here. In fact, the U.S. Census just began tracking the multiracial population growth in the year 2000. NABJ News reporter Courtney Borges talks to some biracial students to find out what they think about having a biracial American running for president.
We need change in America.
He's been deemed the first African American Democratic presidential nominee.
So that's the way the world sees it at this point. It's understandable.
Although Barrack Obama is biracial, a long list of news reporters and Obama himself seem comfortable with the African American label.
I think that he's trying to just represent what is considered probably in America the most oppressed.
Before you blame Senator Obama for playing the race card, some biracial Americans say they understand Obama's response to the push to water down his multicultural identity.
Beginning of his campaign, he classified himself as both. And then now, if you listen to him and listen to his comments, he classifies himself as African American.
Era Wolf, whose father is white and mother is black, says Senator Obama is making the best of the situation by taking advantage of this time to address African American issues on the campaign trail.
He specifically talked about having an impact on black males, which is extremely positive.
As in Senator Obama's case, many biracial Americans feel pressured to identify themselves as one race or the other, often making them feel disingenuous.
I think it's just easier. I don't know. I guess it's just what I want to be associated with more than biracial.
I have personally encountered many occasions where I have met other African Americans, and they don't necessarily get offended, but they don't like the fact that I am multicultural.
Alexis Roberts is a 21-year-old college student who grew up in Chicago's Hyde Park. She says often her friends forget she's biracial when criticizing blacks or whites, perhaps because most find it difficult to articulate a dual racial identity.
That I'm not ashamed of being African American or anything like that. It's just that I would hope to just correct. I just think that it's better to correct people and to let them know truly that I'm not just African American, because that in itself is a lie.
The label we get is what you look like to me. You know, if you look black to me, if you look white to me, if you look this to me, then that's what you are.
Courtney Borges for NIU and NABJ News.
In Courtney's story, Era Wolf says that Obama now refers to himself as black. Is it really fair to consider Barack Obama to be the first black presidential nominee? Joining us today, returning NIU student Mitchell Gaddis, Assistant Director for Housing and Dining Joshua Johnson, and also joining us are NIU student Courtney Borges and Dr. Gyant, who is the Director for the Center for Black Studies. Dr. Gyant, do you think it's fair to consider Barack Obama to be the first black presidential nominee?
I'm not sure, but I think what we need to recognize is his biracialism in seeing him as the first person of color president. We need to recognize his African side and his white side, but that's the way we do it. We need to move. We can't say he's exactly the first black. We just can't say that. We need to recognize both sides of it. But if that is what he chooses to call himself, we need to accept that and not question it, because it's his life and that's how he has chosen to identify himself. And he has said many times that he's never denied his mother, because that's who gave birth to him,
Right.
but he's claiming his black side because that is where he's been welcomed in by open arms. So we need to accept that and not question him.
Accept both sides. Mitchell, what do you think about that?
I agree with Dr. Gyant 100%. It's not necessarily, when you get caught up in categories and things like that, you can kind of hinder yourself, but you just need to know that he is a person of color, and that's a benchmark in itself from being one of the most powerful countries in the world, and it's only been being ruled by a certain demographic or a certain race of people. So it's just good to see a difference and a change, I think.
Great. And Courtney, as a biracial individual, how do you feel about that topic? Should Barack Obama be considered the first black presidential nominee, or do you agree with Mitchell and perhaps Dr. Gyant as well in representing both sides?
I agree with both of them as well, because I feel that when you're biracial, you grow up feeling like you have to choose one or the other, and you really shouldn't have to. It should be welcomed by both sides if that's what you are. So I feel that way.
Right. Coming up next, what criteria do we use when selecting which race we'll refer to when referencing a biracial American after the break?
NIU, serving the heart of America's heartland. Educating new leaders for the nation's third largest region. Bringing expertise and innovation to communities and public schools. Creating new jobs and new workers. Conducting research that improves our quality of life. Northern Illinois University. Across the region, from Chicago to the Mississippi, NIU works.
I embrace both sides of my heritage. I really do. I love white people. I love black people.
We are back and we're talking about being biracial in America. And the question is, what criteria do we use when selecting a label to refer to a biracial individual? Courtney, what do you think?
Honestly, I don't feel that your nationality or background should label you, period, in life. I think that people want to identify you by whatever you are, whatever ethnic background you are. I get that question every day. What are you? I'm a human being. You know, like, what does it matter if I'm black, white, Hispanic? Because honestly, I'm all three. Why can't I be all three? Everyone wants to just really want to ridicule what you are by maybe what your ethnic background is.
Have you ever been labeled as strictly one side?
Definitely,
Would you like to talk about that
definitely. I feel that because I am of Puerto Rican, African American, and Italian descent, I get that question a lot, and people from the Puerto Rican side will identify me as not even being Puerto Rican. Oh, you don't act Puerto Rican. Well, how do you act Puerto Rican? I'm sorry, I live in America. How do you act, you know? I just don't. I think it's ignorant. I also have been told that I wasn't black enough. How are you black enough? I just think it's really ignorant sometimes that people just look down on your nationality. It's just stupid.
Right. And Joshua, do you feel like you've had similar experiences in being labeled on one side or the other?
Well, I think it's always a unique situation being brought up with parents from different racial ethnic backgrounds. And it's difficult to categorize people. And I think people do try to categorize individuals just because it's easier for them to comprehend. They feel like if they can put you in this label, then that's how they're supposed to treat you, and these are some of the things they can expect from you. When the truth is, when you do come from more than one racial or ethnic background, whether it's biracial or multiracial, you are comprised of many different things, and you may pull aspects from different ones, especially even the culture in which you grow up. Like, my mother's Korean American, my father's white American. However, I grew up in the United States, so some of the things that would maybe be traditionally Korean may not be as much a part of my culture. So as I interact with other Korean people, even if it's Korean American, they would think that I identified more as a white American. However, I didn't always agree with that. It's just that it's a different culture in which I grew up in. And although I can try to choose my own label and my own category and what I identify with, I think the truth is a lot of times race is not exactly what we choose, it's what society chooses for us, because that's how we will be treated. So it's a delicate balance and a complicated situation, I would say.
Right. And Mitchell, without any malice intent, have you ever labeled a biracial individual as one or the other?
I think that it would be immature to say that I haven't, because I think we all have at one point in our life. We're all guilty of it.
And what were those qualifiers?
I mean, it would basically be, you know, how you would talk or how you would act, how the certain type of ways that you dress. And I think it's more prevalent on the high school and collegiate level, but as you get into the adult world, it becomes a little bit more nastier, if you know what I mean. Like in younger levels, it's fun, and you know you'll get over it. But as you get older, it starts to get a little bit more serious.
Right, and something we could all probably relate to. Do biracial Americans feel pressure to flip the switch? We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back from our break.
Northern Illinois University, serving the region from Chicago to the Mississippi with state-of-the-art branch campuses in Naperville, Hoffman Estates, and Rockford. NIU delivers the education you need to advance your career. From seminars and conferences to bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees, NIU blends the best of traditional classes and online learning. NIU Outreach Centers offer flexible, affordable, and convenient programs for students, businesses, and communities. Where you need it, when you need it, NIU works.
I kind of do sense that time when I had to do the light switch, like you said, where you have to act differently and speak differently, and that was a struggle for me, and but I think that that's also just kind of an internal thing that everyone really goes through. This is just something different for that biracial, multicultural people have to do.
All right, we're back, and we're talking about being biracial in America. You just heard Alexis Roberts talk about flipping the switch as it relates to how she talks around certain people groups. Mitchell, have you ever had experience with that?
Of course. If you get around, let's say your boss or your employer, you're not going to use the popular MTV slang and address them, you know, how you doing, sir, how are you? But when you get around your friends, you may be a little bit more looser. So yes, I've experienced that. I've seen people do that when they call a phone company or the hospital or the pizza place. You know, I mean, you may get your food a little bit hotter if you sound a little bit different. So, you know, it's just one of those type of things.
Excellent point. And Dr. Gyant, from your professional standpoint, can you talk a little bit about flipping the switch?
Well, we could actually call it code switching.
Code switching.
And everybody has to do it. It doesn't make any difference. When I'm with my colleagues, I speak one way, students another. When I'm hanging out, it's something that we have to learn how to do. And it's not necessarily giving up part of who you are, but it's understanding the culture and the world that we live in. And if you don't do it, it can be a very tragic thing in the bottom. It's almost like the names. When the study was done looking at the names, if your name is Hennessy, you're not going to get a job. Okay, so if you can't not speak the so-called King's English, whatever that is, you're not going to get. I remember people used to hear my name Gyant until I walked in the room and they saw I was black. Okay, and so that's where it all comes from. So we have to be prepared, and that's one of the things we need to teach our students how to do, and we don't do a very good job, particularly our students of, I don't want to use the term color, but of African descent, Hispanic, Latino, Asian. We don't teach them how to do that and how to be prepared to know that that is part of your professionalism. Now, when you get outside the door, I can be just as cool and down as you are in the language.
Right. And this question would be open to anyone. Do you feel that there are certain pressures associated with having to be able to talk a certain way to fit into certain categories, especially if you have more than one ethnic background?
Well, let me just put in something. We all have more than one ethnic background. And so this issue of biracialism is a very new thing. It's very new. It's maybe about 50, 60, 70 years old. Prior to that, we never talked about it because we all are biracial. If you recognize where we came from, we all have different people in us. And so we made it a big thing because of skin color. So if I'm a biracial, I'm dark skinned, but I may have a white parent, but because I'm dark skinned, I'm automatically going to be. And that's when this thing called, so in some sense, yes, there is a sense where light skinned biracial people do have an advantage in corporate America and even in the academic world.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
She said it all.
She said it all. All right. Well, then up next, do biracial Americans have an advantage in climbing the corporate ladder? We'll talk about that when we get back.
The verdict is in. The College of Law at Northern Illinois University is one of the nation's most respected law schools. At NIU Law, top students are part of a tight-knit, dynamic, and diverse learning community. Small classes give them unmatched access to some of the best legal scholars in the country, and state-of-the-art technology prepares them for today's courtrooms. Many NIU law students even get hands-on legal practice before they graduate. That's why so many successful lawyers and judges hold degrees from the NIU College of Law. NIU Law. Discover the difference.
Tiger Woods, Halle Berry, Barack Obama, all biracial individuals who seem to carry the torch as groundbreaking African Americans. In corporate America, and even in the media, do we tend to favor biracial representations of a particular race? Joshua, what do you think?
I could definitely see that as something that would give some people an advantage because whether it's a corporate organization or educational, whatever it may be, people are beginning to value diversity more and more, and hopefully that continues. And I think some people want to have representation that is visible. However, people maybe who are biracial have advantages such as growing up in different cultures, as well as having to kind of do the code switch, and they may be a little bit more successful at that because they've had to do it for quite a amount of time in their life. So I think that they can bring this aspect of not being a white American, however still representing something that is a little bit different to them. I could see that as an example in why maybe they're seen as more successful in different aspects as well.
Absolutely. And what about in the media? Courtney, what do you think? Do biracial individuals tend to have maybe an upper hand in the media?
Yeah, I feel that is true because people like different. They like culture, they like different nationalities, they like people that are bilingual. I just think it's something different and something that people can learn from. Also, just
It's okay. And Mitch, what is your opinion on the subject matter, especially in terms of media? Do you think that biracial individuals may have somewhat of an upper hand?
Yeah, because if it's not in the skin color, it's in the code switch. If it's not, like, look at Al Roker. He's not fair skinned, but he has a code switch when he communicates on the mic. Hence, or Stuart Scott. And Stuart Scott had two disadvantages because he was African American and he had a lazy eye. And that was something that he had to get over. But he could speak very well. And those are two very top journalists. Robin Robertson, people like that, it's the communication. So you either have to code switch or, well, I'm not saying have to because I don't want to put any finite subjects on it, but you have to have one or the other, or if not both. Look at the Gumbles. All of these are different just situations of people who know the game, know how to play it, and know what you got to do. And they know that the favor does come to those who can code switch.
You even look at Soledad Conner on CNN.
Yeah, right.
Nobody recognized her as being biracial until recently. And now she's kind of like been ostracized by the white media, and you see her all now in the black media. Before, she was just strictly white media. So you can see, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, especially with her doing the CNN special in, later on this month. So.